irregularities all along the process, especially, of course, one's own, the occupying authorities' own military forces, but in the last phase, in a kind of fateful way, on the part of the Iraqi authorities themselves. Now, people ask about what was the original sin of the Iraqi process, and of course one answer that one could give, one that I certainly don't want to dismiss, and perhaps I'll return to it again in this discussion, is the war itself. But as I said, in all my analysis I always try to raise the question whether in spite of the war something could not have been done, and then the question is, well, where did the process go wrong, if not with the war itself? And there are, and in the long list that I have just given you, there are two candidates for this. One, and they amount to the same thing. One candidate is the destruction of the state. If the Iraqi state would have been kept more or less intact, or at least only if part of it had been dismantled, if the state apparatus would have been kept, even if the army would have been partially dismantled, or the other way around. Either way, the creation of the forcing of the whole Sunni professional middle class into an antagonistic position to the whole process would not have occurred quite to the same extent. And if that would not have happened, then in the bargaining and negotiating process, Sunni actors could have also been included. And this would have meant a much more inclusive and therefore more legitimate negotiating process with a different constitutional outcome and a different kind of state bargain. Another place where the process could have been different was that had it been internationalized from the beginning, and this would have led, I think, to the same chain of events that I just mentioned, because no international authority would have made that mistake in relationship to the established Iraqi state. So the question is whether these errors, the destruction of the state or the lack of internationalization, were really mere mistakes, or whether they are rooted in something more fundamental. Let me try to conclude by tackling this question, which for me always remains the most difficult one. Recently I taught a course in Cape Town, South Africa, and I gave a presentation on Iraq. It was a presentation something like this, and I went through pretty much the same kinds of steps, except I didn't get through it because about 5 or 6 or 7 minutes into the discussion I mentioned the word liberation. And when I mentioned that word, almost all the students in the group, about 40 from different African countries, including from South Africa, immediately attacked me. You cannot use the word liberation in relationship to what happened. And I danced around with them. I couldn't continue with the lecture. I had to dance around, and I said, well, what about, just think about Tanzania and Uganda. Well, was that, the removal of Idi Amin, not really a liberation? And there was one Ugandan student who agreed with me, but no one else in the room, and that was it. And then I said, I'm from Hungary. Actually today is April 4th, and April 4th was the Liberation Day in Hungary 51 years ago. I was about 3 months old at the time, and for Hungarian Jews that was truly a liberation. And I said, a lot of Hungarians thought of it as occupation from the first moment on, but for Hungarian leftists and Jews and so on, people who didn't like the Germans, it was liberation. So it's a question of whose point of view. And he said, no, forget that. It has nothing, there's no liberation. If it's a foreign army, if it's a foreign invasion, liberation is just the wrong category. I just would not give an inch on this particular subject. And I've been sort of asking myself, what is it, aside from, a kind of ingrained habit to oppose the acts of these colonial or neo-colonial or even American imperial power everywhere in the world, which I think is real in the world. Is there something theoretical? Is there some kind of serious issue at stake that they could not see this matter? Because after all, it is a hideous dictatorship. To get rid of Saddam in itself is a good thing. How can one not see that, or Idi Amin for that matter, or Pol Pot in the case of the Vietnamese? There are other examples of foreign forces, after all, liberating in quite the same sense that I use the word. And I come to the following conclusion, is that though they are not generally right, for example, about Tanzania and Uganda, or about Vietnam, and that in this case they really do have a point, and the point is something like this: can a foreign power that engages